So my name is Jared McCormick. I am the acting director and the director of graduate studies and a faculty fellow here in the Kevorkian Center at NYU. And we're very excited to have everybody here. And this is a manageable 55 people. We had about 210 at our event last week. So I'm very excited that we're below 100 people. So this is the first event in what is a year-long series here at Kivo, Digital Forays. And the Digital Foray series is one in which we're trying to think about not just scholarship, not just engagement, but the digital world we live in and how we ask questions. And so this is the first event, Mediating the News, Digital Platforms and Publics. And one thing across this series that we are trying to really bring in across all of the events of the year are people making media, practitioners, and the practice of engagement with media. So this involves public humanities, this involves digital humanities, this involves many artists. Just by way of mention, we also have another full year series called Global Uprising, which takes the 10-year anniversary of the Arab Spring, as well as this global moment of dissent that we have been living in and certainly are witnessing right now. And that is, again, probably a series of about 12 events across the year. So in the chat, we'll have the links for that. The next event, which is on October 8th, I believe, is in the Digital Foray series. It's Archives and Activation, Platforms and Publics. And we have 3 people speaking about their archival projects, but specifically the platforms they're building around issues of access and engagement. So this event, I wanted to start by thanking the Global Journalism here at NYU. They are a co-sponsor. And really the impetus of this specific conversation that we're trying to instigate here is one of bringing in 3 very well-suited individuals from different organizations to talk about the production of news, but specifically, let's say within the last 10 years, and really thinking about the digital outputs and digital landscape in which they traverse through websites, through Instagram, through Twitter, and what that means for the publics that they are addressing, the engagement that they get from those public. And so by way of format, what we have here is part 1 is half an hour where we'll be hearing from each of the 3 participants. They'll have 10 minutes where they'll be offering an entry point, a perspective, a current event, something from their organization or something that they've been working on. In the second half hour, we'll be adding in our discussant, and the 4 of them will have a larger conversation around these issues that we framed for this event, but also beyond it. And in the final 30 minutes, we'll open it up to Q&A for everybody. And in terms of Q&A, you can chat to the group and we'll pick it up. You can raise your hand, the little reaction, and we will call on you and unmute you. Or you can DM myself. I guess it's not called DMing on Zoom. You can send a private message to me or to Nasser or Fidel. So without kind of further ado, and really to jump into the event, some brief introductions of those of us that are joining us today. We have Lina Atalla. She's the chief editor at Mada Masr in Cairo. And just this week, she was named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in 2020. We have Josette Khalil from Megaphone. She's in Lebanon, and she leads product development and research and development there. And we have Gurkan Ozdoran. He's the executive manager at Doksu 8 in Turkey. So those are the three presentations. And for the discussant, we have Bilge Yashir, and she's an associate professor of media culture at the College of Staten Island. And so the presentations will be going in that order, alphabetical order. So Lena, you are up first.
Okay, so my entry point is centered around the kind of digital dissemination strategies we've been adopting at Mada Masr since 2013, since we started. And because we come from a traditional media background, we were quite set from the beginning to have the integrity of a single website that acts as the main tool of dissemination, and parallel to it would be work done on social media. And perhaps this comes from a certain desire to simulate the newspaper or the magazine experience. So, you know, having an integral experience within a website as opposed to being in the midst of so many other streams and flows of information from different other sources. And you could think of it as forward-looking thinking. So basically the website as an archival repository of content, of everything we've witnessed throughout the duration of our existence for whatever it lasts. But either way, the website has been our main tool of dissemination, but within this conventional structure, and you'll you know, learn more how this is conventional when Josette comes and speaks to us about Megaphone. But within this conventional structure, we have been trying to unthink what a newspaper should do when it inhabits an online space. So, for example, we have been letting go of the traditional classification of a general interest publication into politics and society and all of that. You know, departing from the belief that for readers this doesn't mean much, and rightly so. You know, in every social story there's politics, in every political story there's societal issues. So these rubrics really are dead. Instead, we've been resorting to a tagging technology. So basically having this audience-centric informational infrastructure whereby the way we organize our content is by topic. So people aren't interested in politics by and large, but they are interested in corruption within the ruling classes, for example. So this would be a tag through which we organize our content. So our website is heavily tag-based, and we believe in the conceptual power of tagging in the digital realm, basically. That said, it goes without saying that and you know, we don't have really an option. We have high reliance on social media as a dissemination tool. Up until today, we have more or less 36% of our audiences coming from social, and that could be better if we had been better on social. Our main focus on social media, given this recognition and this belief that we are not social media native and we come from a very traditional world, is to try as much as possible to design and to develop a voice that is fitting these different platforms. Again, departing from the, you know, the classical theory of the medium being the message in many ways. So basically, we try to develop this voice and this language. And while doing this, we constantly ask the question of how does an institution speak online, and specifically in social media spaces that have been initially designed as individualized spaces of conversation, with a high level of affect. So how to develop this affective voice while being an institution and not being an individual. We try to not resort too much to the closeness of to the calculated closeness of templates and experiments that yield in certain specific results when we develop our social media strategies, and instead we try to experiment as much as we can, knowing of course that we all fall under the hegemony of the algorithms, which is a science in and of itself. So we do the basics, you know, we are aware of the prevalence of the image over the text when it comes to social media. So we try to engage with that within the confines of, I mean, I don't know why I'm calling it the confines, but within our editorial sensibilities, given that we are a heavily text-based publication, actually. So what does it mean when social media wants you to use the image much more? So what kind of image do we use in that case? So how do we stay true also to what we're trying to do there, especially if we're trying to defend the long read still and so on? And in general, within these attempts to exist on social media, the main challenge obviously today, before talking about the localized challenges of what's happening in Egypt, is that we are basically dealing with a space that is far less of a network public space, to use the language and the theory of Yochai Benkler, and we are in a much more overcrowded and disintegrated space, and where there is hypermediation and where there is a lot of disintegration. So it is quite challenging to exist in a space like this, especially also that within this overcrowdedness and this disintegration, we're also talking about a heavily privatized space where people are, as we all know, moving from the open web to the more closed spaces of two or three websites owned by big companies that basically run the algorithms that give us the permission to enter, the permission to arrive on people's news feeds. So there is this meta level oppression that we have to navigate with. It's a core political practice that we have to do, as opposed to deciding to withdraw completely from the space, which is something that we weren't far away from at earlier times, when we were much more romantic in how radical we can go. And when we started thinking about, okay, let's resort to newsletters, let's resort to spaces that we can own more, especially that we're not mass media. But there's that much we can do with Facebook in particular being a main source of audience for us, and basically being the place where people are. So for pragmatic reasons, you need to be there. But on the localized level, we have like a very basic need to be on social media, which is that our website has been blocked since 2017. And it's part of an overall government strategy in Egypt that started in 2017 to add to the many layers of repression, is to basically block all websites that the government deems an enemy. So we are nearly 1,000 websites blocked today, and mainly media websites, but also VPN sites that give people access to circumvent the blockage on some websites. So that puts us in a place where we have to exist in parallel universes, and stop thinking stop thinking of the centrality of the website as our main tool of dissemination. And also more and more we feel that it's okay to let go of this initial idea of being a centralized website, because crisis rules for us to think differently. At some point we thought that if the whole operation of Meta can cease to exist, and we have a lot of troubles with the government, and we are very much hated beyond the blockade, we've been also facing other forms of repression from the government. So we started thinking that maybe we can start publishing everywhere and not on our website, like an octopus style operation. So, going to Megaphone and giving them some of the content they might be interested in, going to other like-minded progressive websites in the region and starting to publish with them, and just letting go of this obsession with the central website, which we started off with. So this is the dynamism of the political situation, how it's making us maybe think of ways out. This quarter, we've had about 70% of our audience coming to us from their mobile devices, which is not surprising. We are a country that has a very high level of mobile penetration, over 100%, and smartphone is over 50%. And the main indication that this gives us is it puts this picture ahead of us of people scrolling their news feeds incessantly. So how can we grab their attention while they are on this act. So when it comes to mobile, it's also a fight over time. It's a fight over that split-second attention that we can grab people's attention to with, and how to do that without being sensationalist, again, while staying integral to our editorial lines, is the challenge. And here again is where we have to keep developing voices, textual voices, so a certain texture also in that sense that speaks our language, but also that can grab the attention somehow. So this is like an overview of our online engagement and our dissemination strategies online. Happy to answer questions later on, and thank you.
Thank you, Lina. I love I hope we come back to the octopus. Up next, Josette Khalil.
Hi, thank you for having me. Josette Khalil. So as Jared explained, I'm part of Megaphone. Megaphone is a 3-year-old platform that is born on social media. I wanted to have an entry point that had to do with the idea of changing gears, because I feel this is the biggest challenge we've had in the last 3 years. We wanted to create Megaphone because we felt that people were not being engaged enough with the information and the news that was happening, and to a later extent, politics in general. So we wanted to be where everybody was, and intuitively, when the founders of Megaphone started with Megaphone, they were directly on Facebook, because Facebook is probably the one that has the biggest penetration in Lebanon out of all the social media platforms that exist, in addition to WhatsApp, of course, which is more of a kind of a chatting server, which you all know. So our formats, the way we started working, we had many things that were concerned. Because we were afraid of people's engagement, we had a primary concern where the user was going in their mind, like what were they interested in, and how, as Dina was explaining, how to get to grab their attention. And since we wanted to exist where they were, and we had believed that everybody was trying to hiding on social media, we knew that we had to be on the feed. Like we had to fight for our place on the feed. We had to gain the time and to gain the place on these feeds. So we also became, by the nature of the exercise, very medium specific. We had to adapt directly to various usabilities on these platforms. And we started, I'm not gonna say experimenting because it's a big word. We tried to adapt what we had to say to formats that would function well. And so in the beginning, when we started with videos. So in the first phases of our lives, we were relying a lot on videos. And we only used to have one kind of snackable, what we call the snackable, which is technically a card or a photo that a person can read at their own time, at their own speed. And that used to be the weekly digest. This is a period this is like in 2017 to before October 17, 2019, where the revolution happened, the protest started. So in that period, what we're doing mostly is we're addressing the main issue that we had, that people were not interested in politics, and hence we had to make it interesting to them. That a lot of the younger generation was completely excluded from the conversation because they felt alienated by the terms, by the conversation itself, by the discourse, and hence we had to unpack that discourse, take the big words, take the big concept, and just make them more available and more ready for them to dissect themselves. And the other item that was really important for us was to actually to have the conversation about the things that mattered, and more importantly mattered to us and mattered politically. So these had to do mostly with destroying a stale discourse in politics, but most importantly was to start having the right conversations about liberties, about rights, about the marginalized groups' rights, from the women's rights movement in Lebanon with all the work that they had to do, the migrant workers' rights, refugees' rights, knowing that in Lebanon for the last few years, there was kind of a systemic racism and systemic sexism that was felt on a daily basis by these groups. Another At another time, I think what happened is, I'm going to talk maybe about 4 chapters. So like the first chapter was really when we started up till the protest. And during that phase, we really were in a slow pace. We would do like maybe 1 weekly digest of news. So basically you'll have 4 of them per month, and we'd have 1 video a month. From October 17, the whole gear is going to change. And this is like the first big phase of adaptation. We're on the ground, we're documenting what's happening. The brief completely changed because suddenly everybody was interested in the news. Everybody wanted to know what was happening, where it was happening at a moment's notice. So whereas we had created in the beginning an idea in which we wanted to break the logic of the breaking news apps and the breaking news services that existed a lot in Lebanon, and these typically used to be SMS based, that would send you just 1 line quicker about something that happened. Without framework, without context, just a line. And we were trying to fight that. And suddenly we were in a phase in which we had to kind of address this logic of breaking news and speed, but we did not want to fall specifically into either sensationalism or being so concise or so short that we actually, nothing we said meant anything really in a larger framework. During that phase, what we'll do is we're gonna innovate in what we do. Suddenly we have more types of videos we're doing. We're covering on the ground. We are doing daily videos. Some of the conversations some of the videos we're creating are more analytical in nature. They unpack discourses of the politicians. They unpack political stances or political concepts that have been raging on. And during all that period of time, we had been talking constantly about the economic crisis that was going to come upon us. And by October 17, that conversation just blew open. And a lot of the conversations and a lot of the videos that we're going to make had to do with the banks, with economic crisis, with the Banque du Liban, the central bank, and the government. The other thing that's going to change is we go from a weekly digest to a daily digest. And every night at the end of the day, we used to sum up everything that happened on that day, from whatever happened on the ground and during the protest, or whatever was happening on a scale of the government or on national scale, anything that might have happened within Lebanon. The 3rd chapter happens with COVID. This is a phase in which I think everybody felt that change of pace, and we were facing, all of us, existential questions. I think a lot of people were also starting to start questioning their relationship to a lot of things. And I think in the case of Lebanon, in our reading of our user, since it was so central to the way we were thinking, is that it's kind of met with a moment in which the revolution was kind of slowing down, and there was kind of a feeling of disillusionment and maybe also a feeling of depression. So like things were really going down, you're on a down cycle. And we obviously had to also address that. So in addition to realizing that it was a slow time in general for everybody, but it was also a time for more reflection, more analysis. And for us, we took it as a chance in order for us to really start unpacking all the big concepts that we hadn't had the time to really unpack by that time, but also start having a sustained repeated conversation about certain matters that really needed to be just hammered on and on and on and on. And in that phase, we dropped completely the digest, and we started having snackables every 2 hours during the day. So we created a system, we changed the newsroom, and we started generating cards, information by hourly basis, more or less, of the things that were happening. So we started meeting a bit the breaking news logic, but without really falling into just monitoring or reporting on everything that happened, but making sure that a lot of things that needed to be reported were reported. And at that time, we really had a lot of time to be able to establish some main discussions that needed to happen. One of them having to do with the migrant workers who were having a hard time going back to their own countries. And because they were stuck in a country that was basically having a collapsing economy to a certain degree, a collapsing currency, And so a lot of them were not able to be paid in dollars, and hence they could not go back. So they were working for very little. And because of the situation, they were treated, and with a lot of the racism that exists, a lot of them were treated very poorly during that phase and were left on the streets. So there was a huge demand, for example, on the streets for these people to be repatriated to their homes. And we shed light, for example, on one of those communities, who were the Kenyan communities, who had a very sustained action on the street in order for them to start being repatriated. And this is where we started realizing that what we were trying to do with this mechanism was starting to work, because while working on big pieces of videos that would take 2 to 6 days of work, depending on their length, not their lengths, but how heavy they were in terms of research, we were able, with the cards, with those snackables that we had created, to sustain the action until the video came out. And so for us, it was really important for us to create that new cycle and to make use of the timeliness of certain events for us to complete the sustained action. What got really interesting also is that during the phase of October 17, we started needing to cover live, and we started using the stories. It was so ephemeral before that we never really used it to report anything. We used to mostly use it as a way to disseminate further whatever was existing on our feeds, to catch more people through the process. However, with time, we started using stories to another benefit, which was the articles that we had created. So we were very medium specific from the beginning. And so at the moment where we started publishing articles, we couldn't really publish them on any of the social media platforms because they were in Arabic. Most platforms are not great with Arabic, especially in length. If you got paragraphs, you've got formatting and things of the sort. So we decided to create a website that was purely just for the opinion ads. So the op-eds only exist on the website, and all videos exist on all video serving platforms. And that means that's in Facebook, that's Instagram, and that's YouTube, and Twitter too. And when it came to the cards, till now, they exist on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, but they really do the best on Instagram because they're best built for it. So when the stories came in, the stories we had on Instagram, because also this is where we felt that the highest level of engagement was happening with the stories and with the live. And so we started using the stories as a live platform when we were during the October 17 phase. And if I were to talk about the last phase, it's the phase since August 4 and the Beirut port explosion. I would say that from our users' perspective, from our reading of our users' perspective, there are emotionally, I think, a lot of people have dissociated themselves with Lebanon, which is very hard to try to engage with. But at the same time, we feel that it has also radicalized a bit our audience. We realize now, and we see it also not only on our platform through the comments, but also in general, that a lot of the self-censorship that must have existed before, and especially that increased during a lot of the repression of the state during the phase of even the one preceding October 17. So in the last 2-3 years, there was a kind of a periodical or recurrent repression from the government on people's civil liberties, on their freedom of expression, on their ability to talk about whatever they felt like talking about in the last few years. And I think what's been different since August 4 is they've been radicalized more. And I think to a certain degree, the culture of silence is starting to maybe fade in places. Some people are more willing to name names. Some people we are seeing on things relating closely to the government, more whistleblowers at certain places, which is, I'm not saying there are a lot, but they're enough for us to start feeling that things are starting to chip. And through that, what we also realized naturally that even our tone got even a bit more radical, more categorical in the way we create our titles and the way we speak. However, our medium and our forms have mostly remained the same. Although we've extended through that period, since COVID till now, we've allowed ourselves to be more investigative in some topics, in some dossiers. And with the port explosion, we've really allowing ourselves to focus only on this event and try to constantly bring out from it what we can. And I think this is where it's shifted again, our rhythm, because now we have a dossier that's been running and running for a very long time, and that's adding pressure, or adding pressure to the existing team and how we can keep on going. And we keep adapting.
Great, thank you so much. Finally, the third participant, Gurkan.
Thank you, Jared, and I'm so happy to be here. So this evening, I think my classes are given a reflection. This evening, I will be talking about our news organization, DocuZ News, and what we have been up to in the last 7 years. Our organization was originally formed during the popular Gezi Park protests during the Occupy Gezi back in 2013. However, our foundation could only happen a year later in 2014 on the 30th of March, when we had municipal elections in Turkey. And on the day of our foundation, how could we ever know that we would end up covering elections nationwide 8 times in only 5 years? But I will come back to that. Originally, we were a digital-born entity, so we brought people from various fields. In the beginning, it has always been a mix of conventional and the innovative, meaning we brought together the experience of professional journalism that has been accumulating over the last 2 centuries in the country, and the dynamism of citizen journalism, which was coming into form over the past decade. Back when I was working as an editor for a digital affairs magazine, and I was covering the Arab Spring, I was telling people, even before that, that this tool is going to be incredibly influential in how people are going to get their news, how they are going to make up their political decisions, how they are going to decide on a lot of things. And back in that day, back in 2008 and 9, people were telling me that this is primarily for entertainment, and it is a toy, it is an expensive toy, etc., etc. But we have seen in a lot of Arab countries and in Turkey and in many other countries that it can be an influential tool. So citizen journalism back in 2013 in Turkey was at its crawling moments. It existed in very marginal circles, perhaps. It was at a very isolated atmosphere even. When you think of it, the number of social media users at the time did not even make 10 million back then. So starting with the assemblies at the parks, we had formed an unofficial training group where people who knew how to use tools and devices and technologies and methods, they could share their experiences and expertise with those who did not. So journalists came in and taught people how to write journalistic articles, and then younger folks came in and they taught people how to use the mobile phone as a camera, as a recorder, as this, as that, as a publication portal, etc. So smartphones have really revolutionized the approach to media in Turkey, and that only became a valid point back in 2013. Even before that, there were still instances of journalists that were insisting on going more digital in their newsrooms. However, they would generally get rejected by their superiors. Looking back from the 2020s, it might seem trivial, but at the time, this was utterly relevant to a large group of people, and it still is in a way, as the level of digital literacy is far from desired levels, not only in Turkey, but in a bunch of countries. But going back to our foundation process, it took several months. Several experts from various fields actually came together. They argued and eventually decided on a publication policy and methodology. I will not go into very much detail, but in very short, the list can be summarized as such. Facts before speed. Verification comes before everything for us. We do not want to be the fastest, but we definitely want to be accurate, reliable, and publisher of verified information. We will never use any adjective before anyone's name if they do not prefer to use it themselves. We will not have inflammatory speech, and we will always respect journalistic ethics. Instead of radicalizing rhetoric, we will always aim for the center and let the audiences decide what they should think about what they are reading. And this has actually paid off quite well, because we constantly get feedback, and we get statistics on our readership, and we recently hear that approximately readers are coming from actually pro-government backgrounds. Their political preferences lie with the government, but they continue to get their news from us, which is crucial for us, because in Turkey, as in many other countries, radicalization in the news platforms is a big problem. And then another article in our publication policy states that we will always have a progressive approach to news. To be more specific, we will be pro-feminist, pro-justice, pro-rights. And then instead of using clickbait or try to capture audiences, drawing attention to ourselves, we will be where they are looking at. Perhaps Turkish speakers in the audience tonight might know there is a poem in Turkish which says, "Do not look at me, I will be where you are looking at." We rely on this couplet to determine our approach to publications. So we were one of the first organizations in Turkey to assume the social first principle when it comes to journalistic publications. And that at the time meant Twitter, but also Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. So today we are still available on all of these platforms, plus we have a website. This is our third website at the moment because the first two were shut down. But at first there was a major challenge about what we were doing, as we were the first news organization that assumed the social first principle, as I explained. And furthermore, internet access, digital literacy, even plain media literacy in Turkey at the time were a bit problematic, and today it still is, in fact. But all of these continuously presenting new problems does not mean that we are not doing our best to tackle these challenges. So our organization, in order to get over all of these problems, is indulging in not only publications, but also other activities. So in our news organization, we do publish independent news originating from our networks across the country. But how to establish these networks? We offer training programs. We go to regional hubs, and so far we have conducted 58 training programs in 8 different provinces, welcoming participants from 76 provinces out of a possible 81. So far, 1,600 people have participated in these programs, and over 1,000 of them still remain in our networks, which means whenever there is something happening in their neighborhoods, they can send information. We divide these participants into 3 groups. The closest circle that is most active consists of approximately 40 people that are active on a daily basis. Then there is a larger group of 100 people that are chasing after the information that they desire. They are researching on a topic, they are focusing on a specific area, and they follow their agenda, but also share their information with us. And then there is the largest group, which is rarely given voice throughout the year, and they get activated on days of elections or mass protests or big events, social events, etc. So after these 3 groups, we get our information in the newsroom, and then our editors are verifying and then publishing them. Then we do also conduct research studies to understand the situation of media in Turkey today and to develop our plans for tomorrow, in fact. We not only focus at the national level, but also at the regional level. When we are conducting our trainings also, we often invite representatives from the regional media. And in 2018, we have established regional media coordination with participation of more than 40 different organizations. And we encourage regional media to digitize themselves, to develop their skills, to reach larger audiences, to collaborate and cooperate with each other in other regions, etc. Then our 4th principle is that we open a platform for rights movements, especially to those whose voices are unheard or silenced. Majority of the media, as some of you might know, is controlled by the government directly, approximately 96% actually. And remaining few news organizations in the country are unable to access a majority of these local initiatives. So whenever we are conducting a training, we invite not only students of journalism, regional media, but also civil initiatives, civil society, and local progressive groups, etc. And in return, we do try to empower them. Aside from the regular training sessions for media and journalism, we do give training sessions also on media and communications for the NGOs. But the dangers we observe in Turkey are also varied. While we see many opportunities in the horizon, there is also pressure on the media, the imprisonment of journalists, police raids, all kinds of intimidation and harassment of journalists. However, even a deeper layer of impact on the media freedom in Turkey is actually happening through the academia. Currently, schools of journalism, media, and communications faculties have become are becoming targeted by the government, and dozens of valuable academics in Turkey have been dismissed, suspended, or some of them have even fled the country and are currently living in exile. And their students are suffering the worst of the damages when it comes to media freedom, as they can no longer get to learn the most crucial aspects of the profession, which they will be relying on in the coming decades. So this we believe is posing the greatest danger against journalism in Turkey at the moment. And in order to come over this, we constantly curate new training modules. We invite academics, we invite experts, and then we are trying to create distance learning formats to enable the students. Unfortunately, after these 58 training programs that we have held so far, one of the most common testimonies we hear from the students of journalism is that I have learned here more in 4 days than 4 years at the university. And this is unfortunately a tragedy for journalism. So despite the grim picture though I have been drawing, we are actually optimistic. We do continue persisting on our publications. Over the last 6 years, we have done quite many issues, and we have had huge impact on the ongoing developments. I will quickly summarize the rest of the points I want to make. And in Turkey, the independent media unfortunately follows the government's discourse. The government continues to hold superiority over the discourse, and when the government sets a direction, unfortunately, even the independent media follows. So it is incredibly hard to break this. Those who claim to be critical or opposition, etc., they still follow in the footpaths of the governing alliance, and this is only feeding into the discourse that the government sets. So at 998, no matter how small we might seem, we are trying to break this cycle, that we are trying to crack the discourse and then open an opportunity for the future. So this is actually the point where we come in. We are investing in the future. We are giving training to the students, we are developing skills for the regional media, and no matter how small it may seem, in the last 5 years, there have actually been established dozens of regional media and national media organizations that I can say they are replicating our format, that they are using social first principle, they are relying on digital tools and methods, and they are reaching great audiences, and some of them are achieving quite a lot. Hence, no matter how grim it looks, we are optimistic for the future of democracy and media in Turkey, as we believe the disorganized majority is coming to their senses, and they are currently discussing the problems that are brought up in these independent platforms. So it doesn't matter if hundreds of thousands of platforms are being blocked at the moment, and the government has recently passed a social media law. I will not go into detail, but it is draconian, it is horrible, but the media in Turkey continues to persist, and as a last line, I would like to bring up a book that I love, which explains our working format and organization formats. And I think it might be useful if the audience would also show interest. It is called The Starfish and the Spider, Unstoppable Power of Leaderless Organizations by Ori Barman and Rod Backstrom. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So that concludes, let's say, what we had envisioned in these events, a triangulation of different perspectives. And now we enter into the second part of the event. Bilge will be added in as the discussant. And here, again, I think is one of the most interesting components, because this is where we get to hear everyone talk. And I want to encourage everyone, if you have any questions or comments, even before the question and answer, this is what's interesting about Zoom, is there can be a side conversation going that we can integrate. So, Bilge.
Okay, right. All right, I'm unmuted. I want to thank everyone at NYU Kivo for having me as a discussant. And I also want to thank Lena, Josette, and Gurkan for their invaluable insights. And I really, appreciate all the points that they brought up. I'm not really going to go into, all the details summarizing what they have said, but I see this as an invaluable opportunity to start, developing the theories, social theories about media, politics, and technology, which is a field that has been, long dominated and is still dominated by United States and, West European or European-based academic perspectives, which unfortunately have, kind of left their imprint as these, normative and universal perspectives and frameworks. So a question that in my field we've been, delving into and trying to expand the field is, how do we, go outside these US and European-based perspectives about journalism specifically, but more broadly about the relationship, about the nexus between media, politics, and technology. So that's why, what I've learned from Lena, Josette, and Gurkan is really productive in this sense, because we see these, on the ground activities, both in terms of, challenges and the opportunities they present. So how do we think about digitally mediated spaces of news and information and journalistic practices, citizen journalism, and other similar practices? I just want to, highlight a couple of things that each speaker has mentioned. Lena told us about, how they've been adapting and growing and evolving in this, particular environment in Egypt that is, the digital space that could, that is overcrowded, marked by disintegration and this commercialized ownership structures. And from Josette, we learned, again, how they've been adapting to the environment, taking into consideration the import of, the youth audience, politics, and shifting the conversation from that state-imposed discourse to other topics, migration and gender rights and workers' rights and whatnot. And from Gurkan, we learned about, the value of digital literacy and, appealing to particular audience groups, but also the opportunity, I believe, here lies within, the training programs that they have been, providing as Dokuzate. And it is unfortunate to hear about this, the hollowing out of journalism schools in Turkey. But again, how do we look at this as an opportunity and, innovate? So I have, based on all of this, I have specific sets of questions for the speakers to kind of, roll the ball. And I want to, pose one question at a time. So, I don't want to dump everything together. I just want to start with a concrete question that has to do with the technology dimension. So we know that you and your entity, the entities, the organizations you represent, you are, you know, like in these countries in the specific national context where, you know, like politics is always, you know, like it is marked by tension and crisis and different levels of authoritarianism and, you know, like state actors and state regimes and, you know, like the ways in which they, you know, like tweak these, you know, like technology related, internet related rules and regulations to their liking. So how do you, as journalists, as activists, as you know, like news organizations, how do you maintain your digital safety and security? Because I'm also assuming, I mean, like I'm very familiar with the Turkish case. It's like, how do you respond to digital attacks? Do you get online harassment? Are you being attacked by, you know, government's troll armies? Do you provide training to your staff or to your volunteers about digital safety and security, how to protect their Twitter accounts or the website or social media accounts? So maybe we could just start with that, and then I have some other questions. Thank you.
Do you want me to go first?
It's up to you. Anyone, I mean, anyone. We're not following the particular order.
Sure. I mean, we do, of course, the essential work when it comes to digital security, not just for the sake of our journalists, but also as part of our responsibility to protect our sources. So we follow the basics in terms of digital security, and I would say that we have a certain level of rigor when it comes to that. So, for example, we try to use tools that we can control remotely, communication tools that we can control remotely in case someone gets arrested, so that their accounts can be remotely turned off. We have very strict regulations about what people can keep on their mobile phones in terms of applications. So for example, people are not allowed to have Messenger on their phones. The thing is, in the context of Egypt, you cannot really disconnect digital security from physical security, and digital security cannot, because there is such a uniform discourse about digital security and the do's and don'ts. And I'm a bit critical to the fact that I don't think the conversation is localized enough to the specific risks and challenges that exist in different countries. That, you know, we've had to develop our own templates, and our problem really is that you cannot think of digital security in a bubble somehow. One of our main problems, for example, is around the anniversary of the revolution, or anniversary of some protests that happened, just like the September 20th protests that happened last year, which, you know, this week has been the 1-year anniversary for it. What typically happens is the cops spread around the streets and stop people randomly and start picking their phones, turning on the applications, Facebook and so on. And if they see if any political activity, such as posting something on social media that looks oppositional in some way, this person would just basically be picked up. So the idea would be to try and you know, and have clean phones while we're circulating in the streets, if we want to circulate in the streets. So it's as simple as that. Of course, there is surveillance. Of course, our phones are tapped and surveilled, and this is another reason to have some rigor when it comes to digital security and so on. But this is also more related to protecting our sources, because whatever it is that we discuss, if it gets verified, it ends up being published. So I also, I mean, there's a limit to how much we think we can protect ourselves just by being digitally protected in a context where the physical security and the digital security are completely interlocked. And last but not least, we have the major attack, digital attack on our digital assets, the block basically, and the constant block, because we publish on mirror sites as a main circumvention tool. And basically the mirror sites is a technology that allows you to mirror your original website and rerouting them through alternative domains. And the thing that happens is that the government keeps blocking these domains. So we're right now in domain number 24 in 2 years. So that gives you a sense of the frequency of the blockage. But then I guess it's a great thing that, you know, that you can generate a mirror site in a matter of seconds. So, you know, there are still all the technology that one tap into, I guess, without being too deterministic about, you know, digital security and all of that.
Josette or Gurkhan, do you have anything to add about your digital/physical safety and security?
I would say that we do also the basic in terms of safety, but I wanted to talk more about the logic of the armies and the attacking of posts, because in our case, we haven't witnessed yet an attack on our sites. But in terms of posts, we do get a lot of reporting on specific subjects and on specific actor or protagonist of certain videos. And then when that happens, we can see how very quickly it gets reported, very quickly, very systematically, until our videos get taken off the platforms. And this is important because in our model, we are completely reliant, dependent on the platform allowing us to be published. So anything regarding just the basic publication guidelines, the do's and the don'ts, that we are completely off, we're automatically stuck in a long cycle of us trying to bring back that video, because very often right now we can no longer re-upload it, to bring it back online in a matters of 24 to 48 hours, which is too long for us. Because we live in a fragmented feed, and it's very important for us to be there at the right time. And because we live in certain technologies, certain platforms, they're not easily crawlable, specifically because we also have videos. So a person looking for a certain video is only relying on the tags and the taglines. It's not that if they do a general search that they will find us. So these are very difficult for us to fight, and we're constantly having these struggles. This is part of our kind of cycle.
Well, in our case, digital safety and security is one of the most crucial modules in our training programs. In all our training programs so far, we have included this module, and 1,600 people, as I said, have taken this course. But more importantly, our newsroom constantly receives these updates regarding what to do or not to do. We have a specific set of rules for them to follow. But safety and security beyond using all the mechanisms, all the tools and technologies, all the devices, etc., it is more about a mentality to perceive what level of danger you might be living in, and to act accordingly. So you do not need to stress yourself too much about something that might never happen. But also you should also not underestimate the level of danger that you might be living in. Which also brings me to self-care and psychological safety and security of journalists, which is also one of our most crucial modules in the training programs. Alongside digital safety and security, we do offer also psychological safety and security for the journalists. And for that, we are collaborating with the Turkish Psychologists Association. But even though we are giving all these trainings to the participants and to our editors, we still continue to be targets of digital attacks on our website, on our Twitter accounts, on our emails. We are constantly receiving things. Unfortunately, our website gets targeted more than 1,500 times a day. And so far it has not collapsed, but of course this is slowing down. So our readers sometimes might get frustrated to see that the website is not loading. And this is basically an attempt to censor the information that we are providing. Although beyond these kind of cyber attacks, the government is also taking measures legally. So there is now this social media law, as I just mentioned before, that allows the government to order us to take down articles. Previously, they were blocking access to our articles. Right now, they are giving us orders to take it down and then reply to them with the link, and then next to it to say, we have removed the link that you have, as you have requested. Mm-hmm. And aside from that, as I mentioned before, we are a news platform that relies on social first principle. And for us, our Twitter account is extremely crucial. Mm-hmm. Also, our other social media accounts. So the possibly government-sponsored trolls are targeting us quite often, and our account gets restricted, and several times previously it was suspended. I will share a link regarding one of the suspension orders, but in the last 6 years we have been relying on Twitter to publish our news. However, on Twitter we got suspended and restricted so many times. Actually, in the last 6 months, I think our accounts have been restricted on Twitter for about 5 times. So this is almost once a month. Mm. And it is quite frustrating, but I have brought this up at the Internet Governance Forum multiple times and written reports about this. So at the moment, we are trying to get the social media companies to react to this problem, because if it is happening to us at 9 News in Turkey, it is probably happening to other countries, to other small newsrooms that are presenting factual information that rely on Twitter to publish this crucial information. So social media platforms, I believe, must update their policies regarding these small newsrooms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, and let me just start with that, and then I'm going to walk backwards about what Lina and Josette have said about digital and physical safety and security. I think one of the things that was overlooked in the very early, celebratory analysis of media politics and technology in the Middle East right after Arab uprisings, when a lot of, West-based studies kind of, celebrated these as, Twitter or Facebook revolutions, and it was like the gift of the Western technology, the internet, and that was going to bring democratization to the Arab world. And I think, what Gurkan has shared with us speaks, in contradistinction to that, how these global media companies are also, complicit with these authoritarian regimes, with, state actors in, entertaining these requests, be it from, the government or local authorities or courts. So when you look at these transparency reports published by Twitter, Facebook, Google, and whatnot every year, you're going to see, how many requests for suspension, removal, or page takedowns they entertain. And it's just, it shows us that, they are part of this bigger network of, censorship and control and regulation. And also both Josette and Lina have mentioned, how these tools are also, tools of surveillance, both in, literal and figurative senses of the world, surveilling this, space as the space of, digital knowledge production and information production, but also surveillance of these, individual journalists and activists and actors. And I think one of the topics that we could perhaps talk in more detail during the Q&A is the importance of the infrastructure. What happens when the telecom or internet infrastructures, right, are owned mostly by the state or state, supported companies or loyalist media companies, telecom companies that are close to the government. So what is the importance of infrastructure and telecommunications networks to both, digital safety and security and general state of news and information production? Perhaps, like I said, we can discuss this further in the Q&A session. I have a few more questions. I don't know how we're doing with the time, but perhaps Lena, Josette, and Gurkhan can also talk to us a little bit about their revenue sources. What are the challenges here? I mean, I know you have different revenue sources, you know, like some coming from, you know, like international funders, like international organizations, or US and Europe based, you know, like even, you know, like embassies and journalism and free speech organizations. Some of you are, you know, like also trying to get the audience members involved and trying to build this membership model. So what are the challenges there in terms of revenue sources? And if you get international funding, how does that shape the perception of your organization in the eyes of the state or the regime actors? Because a lot of times, when journalists or activists or NGOs are receiving, you know, like outside funding, they are seen as collaborators with the West, or as, you know, like traders and anti-state actors, or even as terrorists. So have you been, you know, have you found yourselves in, you know, like hot water because of the international funding that you receive? And what are the challenges in terms of, you know, like membership models?
Yeah, I mean, from day one, we were set on trying to develop a revenue model, because also the way Madame also was founded was a product basically of the fact that we used to work for another big privately owned mainstream organization that decided to pull the plug on one of the sections we were managing as a group, which was the English language section. So basically they decided to pull the funding from our work when we started having different political views on matters. So it was very clear in our heads when we started Madame also that we want to experiment with some sort of a hybrid model where we can generate revenues, basing ourselves off two main elements: reader support on one hand, but also services that we can provide for the community around us. So we never wanted the operation to be entirely readers supported, and we believe that for the health of the operation of the organization, it's good to have something vibrant. So we have started a membership club about 2 years ago. And it's been growing, and it's, you know, it responds to this historical interest to basically try out a model or a media model in our country where the readers supported. This is not something that I am aware of in contemporary times, and as far as Egypt in particular is concerned. There are experiments of that kind in other parts of North Africa, but it's also a lot of paywall models, which we don't, we have a political problem against it, especially in a place where you don't have many independent sources of information. So we're not for the payroll, we're for more of a community-centered membership program. And we have some editorial services that we sell to NGOs, universities, translation services, editing services, and so on. And yeah, we're constantly, you know, pointed to by the state as basically collaborators with Western enemies and so on. But it's such a void discourse that we don't even feel the need to engage with it in any form or way. Basically, it's a rejinced sort of discourse or rhetoric rather that just gets repeated at initiatives and groups like ours. So we don't feel the need to engage with it, basically.
Gurkhan, do you want me to go before you? Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I would, in our case, in regards to the funders, we are also funded by international funders and media. A bit like what Lina is saying, it's definitely something we're aware is going to happen, and this rhetoric will always be there. but we choose not to engage with it. We're completely transparent with who is funding us. But a very important thing that has to be said is that for the first year and a half, we were completely led by volunteers. We started as a volunteer-based institution that remained so for about a year and a half, with very little funding that helped us secure space. And later, with October 17th, this has changed, and obviously came the demand on us to think from a business development perspective how to be more financially independent from funders and from grants. It's all still on paper because I think the events in Beirut hasn't helped us a lot to be able to stabilize our production and be able to stabilize quicker from a business perspective. But on paper, we have, and we've done a few small exercises of co-production. We've done commission projects since we have a large part of our team is actually content creators. So we made sure that to use the assets that we had and the skills that we had. And so part of our model to generate ourselves the funds that we need is by producing content for either similar institutions, NGOs, or civil rights or civil liberties groups that need content generated online. So these are more or less the things that we always think about, and we've always wanted to have a membership-based model, but it's such an enterprise for us. Like, we still don't have enough hands to be able to do that, but that's like also part of the plan. So we're very aware that we need to be independent, and we're working on it.
Mm-hmm. Gürkan?
So in our case, we do get targeted quite often, especially recently, when it comes to receiving international funds. Our funding structure is based on international funding from various countries. And recently, in the last several months, there has been started a coordinated campaign against independent media receiving international funding. They have declared them as funded media and assigned them to terrorist groups to say these are terrorist publications, to already criminalize us. But the first time I received such a statement is back in 2013, even before when DocuSite was founded. I was called American Jewish Communist Atheist Spy for Imperialism. I don't know what kind of a combination that was, but it was definitely interesting. So over the years, these accusations have come into quite a variety, and some of them were even very creative. So because I was defending right to access information and free expression, I was once declared the representative of the porn lobby in Turkey. That was very, very interesting, and it was for a while a nickname that got stuck in some friend circles. But when it comes to international funding and publication policies, our funders do not dictate us what to write or what not to write, but we go to them, present our plans to do our publications. So if they approve their budget, this means they are glad to see these publications. For example, if we are running a project on data journalism, then we can publish stories in the field of data journalism. Or if we are focusing on gender equality or gender justice, then we can focus on gender in our news perspective more. But regarding funding, of course, there is a bit of a problem in 2020, the notorious year. In March, the first case of coronavirus was confirmed by the Turkish Ministry of Health in Turkey. And in March also, it was our schedule to apply for funding. So one by one, our funders decided to divert their funds to other sectors more related to healthcare. And at the moment, we are unfortunately desperately seeking for new funding. And before this meeting, actually, I was still looking at new funding opportunities. So hopefully we will continue getting funded. In the meantime, our ultimate aim and plan was to become a self-sustaining news organization by creating media and selling it to buyers, etc. However, things have not gone as we have planned. As when we first established the news organization, we set out a plan that in 5 years' time we would be self-sustaining. However, in those 5 years, we have had 8 national elections, 1 coup attempt, 2 years of state of emergency rule, dozens of police raids in our offices and homes, and dozens of our correspondents getting detained, arrested, some of them serving time in prison, etc. All of these things combined have slowed our schedule down. So still, we are hoping that in the next 3 years, we will become somehow a self-sustaining organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So,
Jared, I don't know how we're doing with timing. If you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so, I mean, we're into open Q&A, and there's a couple options for everybody. You can raise your digital Zoom hand, and we can unmute you, and you can voice your question. You can type it in the chat. You can DM it to us. If I may just kind of jump in with a question, it's one maybe specifically of content. And there's a couple of, you guys have brought up so many different, let's say, tentacles to go with a different kind of octopus, Lena. You know, Lena, you mentioned like what you guys are doing, but still being aware of the long read, right? Which, you know, you think about where that has to be housed, probably on a website, on a certain kind of what that looks like. And Josette, I mean, I know just from following Megaphone, from the importance of visual material. And so I'm just wondering, you know, if you guys might maybe say something more about the specific development of content in relationship to images, to video, to the other things that social media like begets that you put out there, right? So maybe this is kind of a question that's leading of like a whole kind of larger team or reporters that wear many hats and are taking pictures and videos at the same time. But I'm really just thinking about how this, you know, Twitter has certain channels through which you put information, right? And Instagram has a visual register that you have to work with. And Facebook, right, they all have different ways that you massage them. And I was wondering if you might say something about that.
Jared, would you like us to take a bunch of questions or respond to questions one by one? What's the preference?
Yeah, I mean, we can also, maybe for the sake of time, also, if you guys have been seeing the chat, if there's anything in the chat that you guys want to address or that you want to ask one another, this is, it's totally open.
Sure. Yeah, just to quickly engage on with your question, Jared. So the way we've been doing things is that basically we have 2 parallel operations at Meta. We have a news gathering operation, which we have very clearly decided to do, even though we are considered a small scale organization when if you know, in relation to news gathering, which is typically a costly operation. But we insisted on doing news gathering because it is a time where nobody is doing proper news gathering in Egypt at this point. So before the analysis, before the opining, before all of the work on creating discourse, there needs to be basically the very basic act of witnessing the events and producing a record of these events. And this is what basically propelled this hefty operation of news assembly and news gathering within Meta. And for this, you know, we've been with time developing different tools to channel this news gathering process in ways that can also be a bit more responsive and a bit more fitting to social media. So basically we've started doing a bulletin about a year ago, an early afternoon bulletin that basically is, as opposed to providing the morning news, it provides the morning news with a twist. And the way this is channeled on social media is whereas we publish the news bulletin as a whole on the website, we publish it in snippets, in vignettes, in fragments on social media, particularly on Facebook, in order to grab the attention that otherwise putting a whole lot of text on Facebook wouldn't. In parallel with that, there is the deeper type of journalism, the investigative work we do, the long reads, the long features. And these, you know, what usually we try and do with them is we try to keep the integrity of the text, since we are very text-based, as I said before, on the websites, while basically just picking, I'm basically, you know, stating the basics here. So, and what happens when we take these to social media is that we would pick the bit of the story or of the feature that would grab people's attention, and this is how this would be the teaser to this information, to this piece on social media, and the teaser will be reshaped in accordance to the platform. So a teaser on Instagram would be very different than a teaser on Facebook, then a teaser on Twitter, and a teaser on the first day of publishing will be very different on a teaser from a teaser on another day of publishing, like 2 or 3 days, because we keep resharing in order to again grab attention. So this is in a nutshell it. And yeah, I can go back to the questions later on. Yeah.
We actually have a question from Shireen Saad. Oh, wait 1 second, we'll unmute you.
Thank you for your courage, and I'm really impressed by everything you've been doing looking from New York. It's definitely really scary to see what you're going through to keep the message out there. So I'm really interested in the role of women in these movements of protest and revolution and anti-colonial, anti-capitalist, anti-racist movements. So if you could speak a little more about the importance of women's voices in these movements, cyberfeminism, and the LGBTQ movement as well. And are you, I know it's hard to measure progress, but are you seeing any positive change thanks to these mass efforts?
Since there is no one coming in, I wanted to respond to Shireen, if it is okay. So in our news organization, we have a code of GBA plus compliance. So gender-based analysis, we look at everything through this compliance report. And it is the basis of our structure. It is the basis of our rules and regulations within the organization, as well as our publication policy. And on our news desk, there is, I think, at the moment, 50% representation of women, and then 50% men. And also in our training programs, we have gender equality oriented citizen journalism and alternative media programs, which we have given several times in various regions of Turkey. And also in our communications networks, there is a gender-oriented news group, which is most active on the 8th of March, and then the Pride Week, as well as the 25th of November. Last year, right before the coronavirus was confirmed in Turkey, on the 8th of March, we received direct footage from 42 provinces across the country. And we were one of the most active news organizations covering the International Women's Day in Turkey. And it is, in fact, contributing greatly to news coverage, as well as news coverage contributing to the women's movement, I would say. So it is mutually beneficial in a way.
Other questions? So I'm just going back to the chat here. There was a question for Lena. Omar? Can we get him unmuted?
It's so funny we're talking about like being muted and the time we're talking about like journalism and stuff. But first of all, thank you all like for your inputs today. I have a very quick question. Yesterday we were struggling on the idea of all the time we talk about the media and we talk about the message, but the audience or like the recipient part of it, like who are the targeted audience in general, like what's the relationship that's changes. I read from Lena's writing this was sent to us, like, and I loved it, to be honest, that relationship that between the citizen and the state, and like because of those new media platforms are less politicized and more on that relationship, they are less popular. Not sure, I don't know, put words in your mouth, but if you can elaborate more on that part. And thank you all.
I'm not sure which part of the writing you're referring to. I sure didn't say that they are less politicized. To the contrary, I think if you're referring to the article I have in mind, my argument is that there is a much more ease amongst a lot of the few independent media out in the Arab world today in being very, very political in their practice, as opposed to resorting to self-defining as a vocational practice or as just a professional practice. We stand by professional standards, obviously, and this is a very important, not value per se alone, but also it's a very important tool of survival or tool of navigation in order to be able to continue to exist. But at the same time, it's what I've been trying to argue in this piece is that these spaces have become highly political or are also born in a very highly political way, as opposed to being simply vocational spaces because of the repression, because of the authoritarianism, because of the constant act of navigation they have to do in order to exist, which for me is really the locus of politics, right? So, you know, this whole idea that they block your website, so you try to contest that in different ways. So not only you contest it through the technology, so you develop all these mirror websites, for example, but you also go to the court and you try to use the legal system or whatever is remaining of the legal system in order to contest the block. And in a parallel stream, you try to do advocacy about the blocking of websites as a new form of repression in a country that didn't necessarily resort to that practice in particular, because there is collusion with business. Egypt was never a country that blocks websites in belief that it looks bad in terms of investment with the neoliberalization of the economy and its manifestation in an open web that's open, that's never blocked. Never had Egypt decided to resort to a blocking strategy the way Tunisia used to do it before the revolution, or the way Syria has been traditionally doing it. Egypt was much more open on that front, and now there is this mutation. So you're constantly navigating and not only negotiating, but also resisting using different tools. And that puts us in a hyper politicized position, as opposed to just going every day to do this very vocational act of witnessing the news and writing about them, which is anyways also a very political thing. So I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Medium, just 1 second. Let me see if I can get you on.
Yeah. I muted myself. Okay. So I do have another question for Nina. You initially, at the beginning of the talk, you mentioned that you're tagging focused. And the main tag on the English website is still sexual assault. And I was just wondering, how does Meta Masr deal with like Instagram accounts that are like for the protection of sources and the creators of these people? Like I'm specifically thinking of like assault police, and how do you deal and navigate with the ephemeral nature of their content, because it's mostly stories based, and the anonymity, yeah, it's like anonymous as well. Yes, I'm just gonna keep it at this. So how do you deal with these two factors and reporting the news as well? Thank you.
I mean, thank you, Mariam, for this question. For background, sexual assaults have been a main story in Egypt in the last few months, in the sense that there have been like this open process of divulging a lot of cases of sexual assault by prominent journalists, by you know, rich people at an after party in a big hotel in Cairo and so on. So it's been actually one of the main stories we're covering, and the way these stories have been divulged are through independent social media accounts on Instagram and on Facebook that basically and on independent blogs as well, that basically took it upon themselves to collect testimonials and to put them out there in the public, while trying as much as possible to protect the privacy of both the survivors and the victims and the witnesses. Unfortunately, there has been a major crackdown from the authorities on the people running, the admins running these Facebook pages and these Instagram pages, on the witnesses who gave them testimonials, and in some cases on the survivors as well. And to respond to Mariam's question, there was a point at which where we asked ourselves whether we should be whether we should be also on the receiving end of testimonials from people about cases of sexual assault, and we decided that we as a media stand in a slightly different place, whereby we don't generally just collect testimonials and publish them. We do have an investigative responsibility as opposed to these accounts. Again, while standing by all the standards of protecting survivors and the witnesses and all of that, but also trying to work overall within a feminist justice framework, a transformational justice framework in particular. So for example, if we say that in a transformational justice framework, there is the survivor centricity, so there is this tendency to believe the account of the survivor. Our role as investigators is to find alternative modalities to investigate the account of the survivor without questioning the survivor themselves, without putting the burden of proving the story on the shoulder of the survivor or the victim. So this has been more or less our position, is that we have a responsibility beyond reproducing testimonials and accounts to investigate, because that's what's expected from us as a newspaper. But the question becomes, how can we do that within a feminist and specifically transformational justice framework that has an element of survivor centricity in it?
Jared, I have a question. Can I go if there's no one waiting?
Please, yes.
Okay. So all these, like all three organizations and you as, like journalists and activists and citizen journalists, you are generally described as quote unquote emerging and new and alternative and digital and independent. I'm wondering if that creates or has created any tensions with the establishment media in the media industries of your respective countries, because obviously you're jockeying for the attention of pretty much similar audience groups, if not for their pocketbooks, if not for like advertising revenue. Have you ever, or your organizations, found yourselves in this kind of a tension with the elite in, you know, like in the press sector in your country? Or have been, you know, like criticized as these, you know, like newcomers?
I can share, if you want, I could share what happened with Megaphone, but I don't know if somebody else was talking, or somebody wanted to. All right. In our case, I think for a large part, the mainstream media the traditional media is a very partisan media. It's very long established. In the beginning, I think they always thought that you were these small things that really did not matter a lot. However, one very large corporation noticed us very early on during our election coverage during 2018, and they approached us at that time to be able to generate for them their content online. And of course, it was not something that we're willing to do at all. And this is not a relationship that we wanted to, there's not, let's say, a working day-to-day relationship that we're interested in. Eventually, with time, they had their eye on our work for a while, this corporation. And for a few times, they actually aired videos that we had published on national, during prime time shows that they had. In their totality, without cutting them and tagging us, which to us was huge exposure without us asking for it. And in the same way, during all that time, since just, I would say probably October 17, we became more visible to all actors or protagonists in the mainstream media scape. There were a lot of journalists who started watching us, talking about us, resharing us, quoting us. And that changed also the relationship of some audience with us. So if I were to talk about that relationship between the two, and lately, not to blow our own horn, but lately a lot of things can be seen in terms of the mainstream traditional media trying to adapt some of its tactics in storytelling or narrative building around certain videos or certain explainers, that we're borrowing a lot from what we and other alternative media were generating in terms of visuals or ways of explaining things or unpacking certain discourses. So there is you can see a bit the effect of one on the other, which is always very interesting to realize that there's a dent to be made somehow.
Yep. Thank you.
I would also like to respond to this, Bilge, if possible. So a couple of years ago, we conducted a research study with over 300 professional journalists from various cities in Turkey. And we asked them a set of questions primarily to detect their perception of citizen journalism and alternative digital media. And the results were not so bright, actually. While some of them considered citizen journalism and digital media to have positive aspects, another large group actually said these news organizations cannot access non-internet-based readers. They can make ethical mistakes, they lack professionalism, their content is not developed enough, or there is trust issues in these platforms because anyone who has a mobile phone can go up to the balcony and present the news that is happening on the streets, they said. And then they claimed that these journalists' competencies could be less developed compared to professional journalists. And most importantly, they claim that digital media and citizen journalism is paving the way for fake news. However, when we look at the history of Turkey, majority of the fake news have appeared on conventional media and even in some cases the mainstream media. If there are any of you interested in the contemporary history of Turkey, there have been initiated multiple pogroms in this country, which were started with the conventional and traditional mainstream media publishing a bit of fake news articles. I'm dropping the link to this report on the chat screen over there. And then there was actually a question about state calling us the fake news and funded media. I believe this should also respond to that majority of the news appearing to be fake are actually coming from more conventional media platforms in Turkey. And we, on the other hand, are trying to comply and abide by the ethical rules of journalism at all times. And each time our articles get blocked or we receive an order to remove these articles, it is in a way confirmation of the news article, actually.
So I'm just looking at the time, and I realize that we're losing people. So what we'd like to do is conclude, unless there's any last pressing question. I wanted to thank everybody for your time.